It took a minute last year to realize that the worst enemy I faced when creating art was myself. Yes, art can be anything I want it to be, but in my mind, I kept thinking that regardless of what I do, it has to be good. Scratch that. It had to be great. Gallery ready, catalog perfect, Instagrammable, aesthetic background worthy, conversation starting art. These parameters limited my process of creating. The works I studied in European art history in art school seemed flawless in their techniques of chiaroscuro and evocative oil painting. Even in the local contemporary I was exposed to in fine art school, the works seemed well thought out, technically strong, aesthetic, and perfect. Although it is an unpleasant confession, comparison came after me. These were the standards. These artists are successful for a reason, and hence for me to achieve the same, I must set the same standard. My work must be perfect. Perfectionism. One's tendency to set excessively high personal standards. I never really thought of myself to be a perfectionist. In my mind, perfectionists are people who are meticulous, super organized, highly driven individuals who have zero tolerance for any sort of mistakes. I often think of Pearl from Steven Universe, and I always thought that she was a bit too high-strung. Steven Universe fans, please do not come for me because I don't know her that well. Regardless, I never felt like Pearl. I was far too content with slight errors here and there that I don't think she would have acted the same way, or so I thought. It was only around the time last year when I turned 21 that I realized I might just be a perfectionist with the art that I make. Let me paint the scene. It's early January 2023 and you're finishing the last details for your very first solo exhibition. Your works are up, the turnout seems promising, and you're excited to cross off something from your bucket list when suddenly, the work looks a bit skew on this wall. The curation in the one corridor is looking all too wrong. That wall text is printed too large. These works would have benefited from a frame. The arm on this work looks janky when you see it from a distance. These works don't have people in them, so no one will find them interesting. One by one, you begin to pick out every flaw of your show, realizing that there are so many ways it could have been better, but it isn't. It wasn't just this art exhibition where something like this happened, which by the way, I have an entire playlist of a couple videos I made on it. I have just finished studying my fine arts degree and every single exam period I had was incredulously stress-inducing. Setting up practicals always sent me into spirals of anxiety. It was always so hard to be 100% proud with what I presented. There was always something wrong with it. Even if someone doesn't see what I see, there's always that one thing that's stopping this work from being perfect. If you're watching this, there is a possibility that you too create art, so I hope that my experience is not isolated. There is a notion that an artwork is never finished. I think part of this has to do with the fact that no artwork can ever be perfect. There is a difference between good perfectionism and bad perfectionism, more formally known as adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism. Being an adaptive perfectionist means having high standards and goals, but being realistic by setting leeway for potential mistakes and errors. It is setting high bars for yourself, but knowing that you are still human and will fail. Maladaptive is a lot more obsessive, where the high standards do not leave room for you to make mistakes. One does not tolerate any errors, and they tend to be more critical about themselves. In this video, I'd like to refer to both of these as productive and unproductive perfectionism. I believe myself to be a productive and unproductive perfectionist. I'd like to think I've come so far with my passions to the point where I've set quite a lot of high standards that I'd like to achieve. A lot of my artworks made in the past few years have been created and have gone so far because I have set goals that I thought were slightly out of my reach, and I think this is a part of the productive perfectionism. The flip side, there are times like how I described during the art exhibition or during my exams where I thought that every moment I fell short of perfection, I was an absolute failure, and there's no such thing as just leaving the simple errors. Before that sort of unproductive, toxic mentality really kicked in, I actually grew to enjoy the mistakes or the little errors or the rough patches in my art. I felt like all of the little mistakes I left in were the unique parts of a work that would have never come by organically, because you can't fake a mistake. One of the more famous phrases that Bob Ross, and yes, I'm quoting Bob Ross because he's a legend, there are no mistakes, just happy accidents. And I believe that productive perfectionism holds this to be true. Although we want the best for ourselves or to do the best, there's often going to be times where we do slip up, or there is something that is a little bit unfinished, and that there is a magic that hides between these different points of failure. On the flip side, unproductive perfectionism was taking root in my mind really quickly. And soon all of these little mistakes that were happy accidents became my insecurities and my flaws. Mistakes were proof that I was not competent enough. I became a perfectionist in the way that I believe that everything my hands created should be utterly flawless. It's no shocker that that is impossible to do. However, it still scared me away from doing the things that I like creating. I spend more time trying to mitigate the mistakes than actually creating. I began to daydream and problem solve and think of the different ways I could make something perfect, when in the meantime I was just wasting so much time I could have used to just make something. I was also wrestling with ideas on what I should make that the public would like, or something that would get me into the opportunities that I wanted, something that will blend into the art scene around me. It's hard to believe that it's going to be 4 years since we were announced to be in a global pandemic. I think that era had a lot of lasting effects on how we think, how we live, how we behave. But I wanted to talk about this drawing exercise that I did during that time. Even if I knew doing certain actions were towards my own benefit, it took a lot more out of me to create something, or to continue as if life was normal when it clearly wasn't. In these times, I realized it was important to be realistic and sort of enter into survival mode. Do things that were in my capacity at that time, even though it is clearly different to what would have been in the normal. And for that, I would do this pattern exercise here. Every single day in the morning when I would wake up, I would just open up this watercolor pad and just doodle all these random shapes and use weird colors and let myself wander for exactly 10 minutes. And once those 10 minutes were over, close the book and then get on with my day. As you can tell, it's not the prettiest thing. It doesn't mean anything. I would not be framing this and showcasing this in exhibition. I realized that this has been a lot more important to me than some of the other well thought out works that I have done throughout the years. This had so much more impact or help towards me than I thought it would have during those times. It gave me something constant, it gave me stability, it gave me something I could trust in, especially during a time where everything was uncertain. But because it was just doodling for 10 minutes, I didn't have any other expectations I set up for this little exercise. It was freeing because I didn't have to care about it looking nice, but I didn't have the pressure to create anything pretty or outstanding because it was just for me. The problem I faced with being in art school is that I always needed a why for everything. We were constantly being pushed to answer why do we do what we do, or why we wanted to create what we did. Understanding your identity and reason for being may make you feel more grounded or give yourself direction. I know it does for me a lot of times. Too much attention to the why made me afraid to approach the what. It became why should I create instead of what can I create or what can I do. And a lot of the times I felt like I didn't have a worthy enough why, which is why for the most part I just stopped doing anything. This is a thought that may ruffle the feathers of a lot of creatives out there, but not every piece of art or everything needs a why. And not every why needs to be something so profound or revolutionary or so creative. If searching for a why prevents myself from creating, then I'm just gonna ditch it. Creating for the sake of creating and doing for the sake of doing, that's enough. Being able to do something for the sake of enjoying it, that's more powerful in itself than trying to craft some very specific and very special why. There is a saying that goes, motivation isn't needed before you do something. It's formed after you do it. In other words, to be motivated to create something beautiful, I need to start making something. I've seen so many forums and posts online asking people how to get into the flow state in order to create and be in the zone. I think it's a perfect example about how waiting for the ideal environment to do something will just make you waste time, and it's never going to come unless you just start. In all of the years that I have created art, I really can't think of a time where I entered a flow state, quote unquote, before I started working. It always happens once I'm just doing what I need to do, and after a while I just get into this flow state. The New Year era is notorious for being an optimistic planning season, and I myself fall into it heavily. I enjoy setting up all my different plans, starting new journals. The truth is that a lot of these plans will not go to plan, especially in goal setting as an artist. So not even thinking about being a perfectionist in what I make, but also how I am. Being a perfectionist and thinking that I need to be a certain way has also just ruined most of the creativity I had built for myself before I went into fine art school. I thought that there had to be a perfect route that I needed to take to succeed, and all of these expectations and this desire to be perfect tends to limit and tends to snuff out any sort of flame you already had in yourself. Maybe you're also a notorious planner like myself. I wish you all the best, but also just a reminder, it's okay not to be perfect. If anything, sometimes perfection is the antithesis of creativity. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like. If you like me, subscribe. Comment down below, all that fun jazz, and until then.